Hey everybody, welcome back. It is CALLOUS Draft League Week 6, and in fact it is the final draft that I'll be covering in the regular season. We've got the two teams that I've not yet covered. In this case, it is the orange team and the red team. Orange team on the left will be kicking off in this particular draft, and the red team on the right shall be receiving. Our players today, CptAwesomeness against ThisGuyMuks, a large mongoose playing for an undefeated season, and that's going to be attempted to be spoiled by Mewy, I guess. Mewy. Go with Mewy. And it's going to be DJ Arctic Pirate against Sawkasm. This match, regrettably, probably does not have the stakes of some of the other matches. It is still theoretically, mathematically possible for the red team to make playoffs, but they would have to dominate. They would need something to the effect of a 9-1 or a 10-0 kind of week in order to get in, and then even with that, they might need specific results from other pairings as well. Not mathematically eliminated yet, but they would need a hell of a lot of things to go their way. Nevertheless, when they are theoretically in contention, they will hopefully take this seriously and give it their best, whereas Orange Team is firmly in second place right now, and pending a pretty massive meltdown, they should get there. Even going like 3-7 or 4-6 should be enough to lock up their spot, though it is very unlikely unless they go for like a 9-1 or a 10-0 that they overtake the green team and get the playoff bye. So very, very likely orange is in playoffs, but not with a bye, and red is not in the playoffs. But let's go through the motions and play this out anyway. We might see some good games, and who knows? Stranger things, 9-1 weeks, 10-0 weeks, not very likely, but these things do happen. So, like I said, kicking off is the orange team, and they are going to go with the normal Tyranitar and Metagross opening that seems to be the go-to. Have covered a couple drafts recently that haven't done this, which is great, but this does seem to be the default, and here it is again. The one that I particularly want to take note of, like I said, is a large mongoose, because he's 5-0 right now. I had never heard of him prior to this tournament, but apparently pretty good at this, and is playing for a perfect regular season. 6-0 would be a fantastic little accomplishment for him. So, with this opening, because pretty mindless, you just take two of the best pokes, the question is always, how do you respond to it? And there has not been a consensus. Every team is doing that a little bit differently, but this is what these guys are going to do. So they're going to go Celebi into the unknown player, which seems fine, and then they're going to go with Starmie into T-Tar, which is like, okay, but it makes it better when you do this. Then they're going to go Skarm into Meta. So I personally would have swapped the order here. I think I would rather have Skarm against Tar and Starmie against Meta, as opposed to the other way around, as just like a nitpicky thing. However, the fact that you're taking the Starmie, which is a little bit odd, but I don't hate it. But the fact that you take the Starmie here is made better by the fact that you're also taking Skarm, because you take one of its number one, I don't want to call it a counter, but one of the number one things that it doesn't want to play against immediately off the board. So you're helping your teammate immediately if that's what you're trying to do. So not only taking three powerful mons, but also doing something that helps out your brother. And yeah, I mean, like I said, my only qualm here is I personally would have swapped the matchup, swapped the positions of the me and the Skarm, gone Starmie into Meta, and gone Skarm into Tar, as opposed to what they did. But I don't think this is terrible. I think it'll just probably make the Metagross either pick up a Magneton or more likely go with mixed meta, which I think is a fine set. So on the wheel, cue my annoyance and ranting. Fucking kids these days. Alright, Aerodactyl into Celebi. Fine pick. More than fine pick. Good pick. One of the things that you should be taking into Celebi. That part's great. Any guesses what part I'm a little bit more disgruntled about? Ah? Ah? Okay, if you guess Snorlax, kids, you are correct. I don't want to repeat the same stuff that I repeat every time. The gist is, I don't think it's a round one pick in this, but I'm the only person on the planet who thinks that. And more importantly, even if it is a proper round 1 pick, you don't pick it into Celebi. But they see it a different way, and they do, in fact, pick it into Celebi. What I would do if I'm in this position for Captain Awesomeness, and this is assuming he already picked the Lax, not what I would pick instead. Let's say that he picked exactly what he picked, Lax and Aerodactyl against Celebi. Obviously, it's too early to know the exact sets, the exact matchup, but I would automatically already be thinking from Captain Awesomeness' seat that I want the Lax to try to bait the Celebi, and I'd run it as like CM Boom. So Celebi comes in on a curse, tries to click Leech Seed, you just blow up on it. That would be what I'm trying to do if I'm Captain Awesomeness, because if you try to go with Curse Rest Lax, you will simply lose to the Celebi. Alrighty, rant over as we swing it back. They are going to respond as follows. Blissey, Whizscarm, and then Swampert into the tar. And then Gengar. Okay. You can never fault Scarm Bliss. Really good, has its own little moniker for a good reason. I don't know that it's incredible into meta. I'm not saying I wouldn't make this pick. I just think that mixed meta with the right partners can threaten it, can break it. So we'll see how he addresses that. But Scarm Bliss is always a good start. There's basically nothing to criticize about that. The Swampert pick is good. You've got Swampert Starmie into Tar. That seems like a fine start. And then the Gengar pick into Lax and Arrow is fine. Gengar doesn't safely switch into either one, but neither of them safely switch into it either, so it can go either way. And Gengar has fine synergy with Celebi, so there's nothing too egregious about these picks. The follow-up to round out round 1 is going to be Milotic and Zapdos, respectively. Really, really strong wheel for a large Mongoose. T-Tar Zapdos is hell of a 1-2, considering that Zapdos came all the way back, and that Zapdos is going to be into double water as well, so quite strong in the matchup. Seems like the perfect poke to make it back to him. And as far as the Milo, that's another good poke that I like into Scarm Bliss. I think that it can really outlast both of them since they both tend to be pretty passive. I think Scarm Bliss stuff, obviously we don't know what else is going to be on the team, but Scarm Bliss stuff can have a very difficult time actually killing Milotic, and I think it has good synergy with the Metagross as well, so I think that was a good pick also. So we jump over to Mewy to kick off round 2, and then he's going to, of course, work his way to the left. His pick is going to be an interesting one, Raikou, and then his teammate, Mux, going to go with Regirock. Raikou, huh? I don't dislike it. I don't know that it has, like, specific merit against Zapdos T-Tar. I mean, it does win the 1v1 almost always against Zapdos, so there's that, but it's not like a Zapdos counter, per se, and it certainly doesn't want to switch in on, like, a T-Wave or a Toxic or something that the Zapdos could have, so, I mean, you still, even though you have something now that beats Zapdos 1v1, you still need something that switches into Zapdos. So we'll see how he ultimately addresses that. The Regirock pick I love. Very good into both Lax and Aerodactyl. Weird that that's the first Regi off the board, but I've learned that people underrate Regice. That's one where it isn't just me having a weird opinion like I do on the Snorlax. I'm very, very confident on that one that I'm right. Zakaru and I have seen the light. We know how good Regice is, but the rest of you need to come to Pokemon Jesus and understand the gospel of the Regice. But in the meantime, his brethren, Regirock, like I said, good against both Lax and Aerodactyl. I think this is a very good pick. And I can't even off the top of my head necessarily think of something I would have rather him have taken. I think it's money. I think the Regirock is a great, great pick there. So good on him. I don't wear hats basically ever, but I tip my cap to you, ThisGuyMuks. Going over to the other side, their response is as follows. Salamence, Regice, and Charizard into someone who just took Regirock. More on that in a moment. Okay, Salamence, perfect pick for the matchup. Another Mon that can and probably will go mixed and is threatening to the Scar and Bliss core. You just bring a set that has, say, both Brick Break and Flamethrower or Fire Blast, and it threatens both of these. Probably looking at a set along the lines of Dragon Claw, Fire Attack, Brick Break X, where X is Wish, X is some hidden power, X is Hydro Pump, X is Rock Slide, whatever. But something to the effect of a traditional OU mixed ments, and I think that, with what is probably a mixed meta as well, is a very strong start against this particular core. I would like to see Sawkasm pick up something to the effect of a Vaporeon or just a generic wall, a generic bulky water to try to combat some of this stuff. But we'll get to that in a minute. So, Regice for a large Mongoose, love the poke. It's a little bit worse in matchups with Sand. It does lose some of its durability, so minor nitpick there, but clearly good against these Pokemon. Beats all three of these 1v1 generally. With Raikou, it is set dependent, but still, you need a special wall given the Starmie and the Raikou on the other side. Probably Regice is the best one available, I guess, because it's a Sand matchup. There's an argument to be made that you could take Registeel here. I'm okay with that as well, but basically only if Captain is then going to take Regice, because I really don't like passing Regice here. So with that in mind, I guess Regice is going to suffice. Like I said, it's just a little bit less durable in the sand, but that's a minor nitpick, not the end of the world. Okay, Charizard is good, and it threatens Celebi and Gengar, and to a lesser extent Regirock. The problem is you're taking it into the Regirock, which is going to really exasperate that already present rock weakness. So I like the Mon, I just don't know that I like it in this moment. I guess they're both dead set on being the aggressor in this matchup, because it's the same deal. Even though none of this stuff really switches into Charizard. Charizard doesn't really switch super well into most of this stuff either. Maybe into like a Leech Seed or something from Celebi, but doesn't want to come in on T-Bolt or T-Wave or Rock Slide or any number of these things on the other side. So we'll see, but this is looking like a matchup so far. We'll see if either of them slow down and grab defensive pieces, but looking right now like these guys are content to go blow for blow, just throw haymakers like a good old bar fight, and last man standing wins. So, Sawkasm here with the double pick is going to do the following. Not what I was expecting, to be honest. He's going to go with Jolteon and Registeel. I don't necessarily object to these picks. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't take, like I said, like a Vaporeon or a Bulky Water, but I don't mind this. The Jolteon is reasonable against all of this stuff. You're going to have the threat of T-Wave or HP Ice against Ments, which you outspeed. Obviously, just Electric against Water. Electric has the advantage. Jolteon generally beats Milo. Meta's a little bit trickier, but you're never going to eat an EQ from it unless you're okay with that, because you can always just Baton Pass away. Also, if it ends up being mixed Metagross, which is what I'm thinking it's going to be, but we'll see, then it probably won't even carry Earthquake. But either way, the Jolteon, even though it's not like, oh my god, be-all, end-all in the matchup, it seems at least reasonably good in the matchup. I'm okay with that. And then Registeel, like I said, I had a water in mind more so, but as far as just a generic, reliable wall, fair enough. Different flavor, but same family. Registeel should fit the bill. Flipping it back over to the orange team, their triple pick is as follows. Harry Mama, Alakazam, and Claydol. Okay, I don't know that I really understand the Yama pick or the Yama placement. There could be a bit of a defensive element, both protecting his own Lax and his teammate's T-Tar, and I guess the Regice as well. So if there is a defensive element in mind with this pick, then cool. Good job, Captain Awesomeness. You are a good teammate. You took a good poke off the board. That's it. Nothing. If he wasn't picking with a defensive thing in mind, if this is just him picking for his own matchup, then I would obviously question it a lot more. Hariyama into Celebi in and of itself, I don't love. And then it's not fantastic into Gar either. Hariyama, of course, should get the advantage against Regirock, but I don't like it into 2 out of the 3 pokes on the other end, so meh on the Yama pick if he's just picking for himself. But if he's picking with his teammates and with defensive things in mind, then I dig that for sure. Alakazam for a large mongoose. Perhaps a little bit earlier than I generally like to pick Alakazam. I guess I don't necessarily love that poke as much as most people do, but it's a threat in basically any matchup where there's not like a Blissey or a Lax on the other side, and that is indeed applicable here. So we'll see how much of a threat it ends up being. Mew isn't dead in the water to it by any means, but it can outspeed all this stuff and hit it super effectively in one form or another. It might even carry HP Grass in this matchup. So, again, Mew at some point between the Zapdos, the Regice, the Alakazam, instead of just going blow for blow with this stuff, is going to need a proper special switch in. And those options kind of starting to deplete. So, he's going to have to address that at some point. We'll see how he ultimately tries to deal with it. Great picks here. A lot of good value. Very strong pokes for the end of round 2. ThisGuyMuks, Gyarados, and then Mew with Medicham. So yeah, Gyarados seems pretty reasonable here. Intimidate relevant in 3 out of these 4 matchups. Once you DD, you can be a threat to all of this, maybe to a lesser extent to the Arrow, but there's the omnipresent threat of T-Wave, which really, really cripples Arrow, and there's absolutely no Heal Bell or Aromatherapy user in sight right now for CptAwesomeness, so I think like DD, HP Flying, Earthquake, T-Wave Gyara, really good in this matchup. Obviously, you threaten Hariyama, you win the 1v1 going blow for blow with Zard, and again, the threat of T-Wave. You're only okay against Lax, but once you start boosting up, it does not switch into you very well. And again, just the threat of T-Wave, but not everything has to counter everything. Overall, Gyarados is good against the majority of this team, and I think that is a great pick for the matchup. And in general, I don't think Gyara should ever go later than this. It does anyway, but that's another Mon that people are underrating and sleeping on. Gyara is very good. Medicham has obvious merit into a dude with T-Tower Regice, so I'm not going to give him a hard time about this pick at all. I think it's a good pick. I think it fits the team. It's aggressive, as his whole team is, and it makes plenty of sense into the matchup. Unlike other fighters, it is a huge threat to Alakazam because it learns Shadow Ball, and that would easily, comfortably one-hit KO Alakazam every single time. So the Medicham is a big threat that a large mongoose needs to deal with. Like I said, I really like both of these picks. My one qualm, and it isn't really with the Medicham pick, because I would take Medicham here always. I just want to note, like I said for Mew, that at some point he's going to need a special switch in. But otherwise, definitely like what he's done with his draft. So we switch it back over to a large mongoose, and we work our way to the right. The picks are going to be as follows: Venusaur and Kickin' Chicken. Alright, so taking a Grassmon into double water and electric, that makes perfect sense to me. You probably look for whatever the sturdiest Grassmon is still available, or maybe the overall best Grassmon still available. Venusaur gets the nod. I mean, stuff like Ludicolo and Sceptile are available, but those are both less sturdy in the matchup here than Venusaur would be. So even though this is earlier than most people pick Venusaur, it makes a lot of sense in the matchup. And as an added bonus, it resists fighting, so it's actually reasonable against the Medicham as well. Venusaur seems like the perfect pick in this situation, seems very heads up, because it kind of wins the 1v1 against all of these. The grass threat against Starmie and Swampert, the electric resistance against Raikou, and the fighting resistance against Medicham. So as early as that seems, as weird as that pick seems, I think the Venusaur there is actually the perfect pick. So very heads up for a large mongoose, just a little glimpse as to why this guy is currently undefeated 5-0, and obviously he understands the format. Blaziken for DJ Arctic Pirate, I like it. That's a huge threat here, the exact kind of poke that kicks through Skarnbliss. None of Skarnbliss Registeel want anything to do with Blaziken. 1v1, Jolteon can beat it, but it's the same thing. You're definitely not switching in, whether it's to a Fire Blast, a Sky Uppercut, even a substitute. Jolteon cannot switch into Blaziken like at all. In fact, Sawkasm has no switch into Blaziken right now. And if I have ever in my life seen a man who needs a bulky water, it would be now. Sawkasm really, really, really needs Vaporeon. It would beat all of Salamence, Metagross, Claydol, and Blaziken 1v1. And they're going to have the opportunity to take it here, so this unbiased commentator thinks it would be very, very prudent of Sawkasm, like kind of emergency levels at this point. Take fucking Vaporeon. Now's your chance. Do it. Don't delay. Call now. Supplies are running out. Take Vaporeon. Spoilers, he doesn't. Okay, this is what they're going to do instead. They're going to go with Dragonite, Porygon the second, and Moltres. No! No! Abort! No! Ugh. All right. Dragonite. It really meshes with this kind of mixed offense that Mux has going on. Again, another HP Flying and another T-Wave threat, which I think is good in the matchup. Happens to resist Fire against the Zard. Can learn Focus Punch against the Lax. Seems like a great, great pickup in this matchup. I think Mux has a lot of threats that Captain Awesomeness' team doesn't necessarily have fantastic answers for. Now, the P2 pick, I guess, is just getting ahead of it. I mean, he must be looking at it and being like, man, I have Starmie and Raikou and Medicham. I'm kind of Doug vulnerable. I kind of want to make sure that doesn't happen to me, so let me just go ahead and just preemptively grab this now. I don't necessarily hate that. It's weird in this format because, like, it's so face up. The fact that you just took the Porygon 2, your opponent is obviously not going to take Dugtrio now, and maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that's all he wanted, but I don't know. It's a fine balance between, like, identifying what your weaknesses are, and Mewie's right. He is weak to Dugtrio with the Starmie, the Raikou, and the Medicham, so he is correct, but at the same time, like I said, if you take it now, your opponent won't Dug, so is it a wasted pick? But the counter argument to that is, well, if you don't take it, can't the other team just take P2 and Dug in one swoop? And now I don't get it, and I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. It's kind of a balance, kind of a fine line, but ultimately I think one wasted pick, if you want to call it that, isn't necessarily the end of the world in this. I think he can still round out the team somewhere in the next 3 picks, and if he's just viewing that as a deterrent and basically making it so it's more or less guaranteed that Mongoose will not take Dugtrio, honestly, that might be worth it, all things considered. So, kind of an off-the-cuff pick, but I actually really like it. I think that the Venusaur pick was really sneaky good, and I think the Porygon 2 pick, even though it's a bit of a head-scratcher initially, is also actually pretty sneaky good. So, good drafting in this one, for the most part. But not this pick. Come on, man. I mean, look, first of all, you just took Moltres into Milotic. Not good. It's okay against the rest of this stuff. It doesn't really switch into a lot of it. Maybe you beat Blaziken 1v1. I mean, it does at least make it less likely that it's reversal, but I mean, there's nothing preventing Blaziken from just carrying Thunder Punch or something to that effect, or even worse, how about Rock Slide? So I don't know that Moltres is exactly a Blaziken counter when it can literally one-hit KO you. But more pressingly, even if the Moltres were, like, pretty good in the matchup, and honestly I don't think it is, I think that Mence and Blaziken are both going to carry Rock Slide. Hell, Claydol may even carry Rock Slide now. And Milotic walls you, so not only do I not think the Moltres is not that great in the matchup, but I think you really, really, really needed that damn Vaporeon, because it beats the vast majority of this. And I think it's a missed opportunity. And yeah, he's gonna be bumming, because Awesomeness on the wheel is gonna take the Vaporeon that I strongly feel Sawkasm should have grabbed, and then additionally he's gonna take Wheezing as well, so that's gonna leave him in a tough spot. Sawkasm now is gonna be resigned to, like, Slowbro or something to that effect, but I think Vaporeon is very much where he wanted to be, and I think that was a definite misstep to not grab that. I don't think the Moltres is that good, and I think he really wanted and needed the Vaporeon. So I think this might be a crucial moment in the draft where things in that matchup went from even-ish to probably swinging in the direction of DJ Arctic Pirate. As far as these picks for Awesomeness, of course you grab the Vaporeon there, whether you're going to run it or not. You just do. As it turns out, I probably would run it, given what's on the other side. Ice Beam is a threat to Celebi and Dragonite, and in fact, there is no Ice Resist for ThisGuyMuks. The water part of it is good against Regirock. You want bulky waters in general against Gyarados and Dragonite, so Vaporeon makes sense in this matchup as well, and that is all the more reason that Sawkasm should have grabbed it. As far as the Weezing, I like that pick too. You're protecting your own lax, and furthermore, it is going to be reasonably good. It's certainly going to be good against the Gyarados. It's certainly going to be good against the Regirock. That alone is good enough reason to take it, but if you happen to pester Celebi or pester Dragonite or whatever, even better. But these are both exactly the kind of picks that he wants in this matchup. So I think as close, as even, as tight as this has all been for most of it, I think these last three picks have been devastating and have very much swung things in the direction of the orange team. I think the Moltres pick was a mistake, and I think Vaporeon and Weezing were both huge pickups that really, really make the matchup a lot better for Captain Awesomeness. I was leaning towards Mux. I liked his side of the matchup prior to those picks, and maybe he'll still win, but I think that was huge gains for Captain Awesomeness. So look back at this moment. If I ultimately end up predicting orange to win, this sequence right here, these last three picks, a very large part of the reason why. So, with his tail between his legs, Sawkasm goes oopsie fucking daisy and picks up Slowbro, which is fine, but Vaporeon definitely would have been better. And then additionally, they're going to take Glalie. Let's try that again. Glalie, there we go. And Miltank. Okay, I don't want to harp too much on this. I just spent a couple minutes on it. Slowbro's fine. The choices are limited at this point. Gotta do what you gotta do. Vaporeon would have been better. Slowbro will have to suffice. The key difference as to why Vaporeon would have been better is because it has self-recovery in the form of Wish. Yes, Slowbro can learn Rest, but not the same. Maybe it's going to be Rest Talk. Honestly, I don't even think that's the worst idea in the world, given what the matchup is. Glalie in the middle, huh? Yeah, I mean, hey, it's just the classic taking a spiker into an opponent who not only is overwhelmingly grounded, 4 out of his 5 pokes are grounded, but doesn't have a spinner. Of note, some of the big guys, Cloyster and Fori, are both not drafted at this point, which is unusual. So certainly those guys I would think are going to get picked up somewhere down the line. But for now, we have a Spiker against a dude who doesn't have a spinner, and the Glalie is reasonable against the Zapdos, the Regice, and the Venusaur as well. So it makes sense in the matchup. Right now I'm operating that he's not playing the Porygon 2. So I think his team, as of this moment, is the 4 first picks that he took, and then also Glalie. Miltank, huh? As much as I love Miltank, truly one of my favorite pokes. I mean, it's legit my number 1 favorite poke, in fact. But as much as I love Miltank, I don't know that I love it in this matchup. I think it isn't great into Hariyama or into Weezing, both of whom I think are almost certainly going to get played by Captain Awesomeness, and I mean, it's like okay against Zard because of Thick Fat, but remember that Zard is often going to carry Focus Punch, so there's that. And Miltank is like not amazing into switching into Aerodactyl or Lax either. It can beat them 1v1 if they start on equal footing, but my bigger qualms is that Hariyama and Weezing are both very bad Miltank matchups, so I don't think I love that particular pick from Mux. I love the poke, but I don't know that I love it in this matchup. I feel like there must have been something else that he could grab there. I wonder if he should have taken one of Fori or Cloyster here. That, I think, would have spiced things up a bit more, but gonna go ahead, respectfully, love you, Miltank. You're my favorite. You're so cute. I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with grabbing Miltank in this case. So rounding out the round, little bit of dedicated hatred. Magneton, baby, and also Heracross. The Magneton is self-explanatory. That is just for the Scarm, and the mind game now begins of does he actually bring the Magneton, and in turn, does Sawkasm actually bring the Scarm? That will be an interesting thought process for both players when it comes time to actually build the teams. But DJ Arctic Pirate has a little bit of a Magdoll here. Magdoll Milo Salamence meta. I mean, that's almost OU. Certainly the Mag is going to make life frustrating for Sawkasm, and if for whatever reason, whether it gets eaten or whether he just doesn't bring it because he's afraid of Magdoll on the other side, either way, if Sawkasm does not have Scarm and does not have Spikes, I think his team becomes pretty damn passive and has a hard time actually winning the game. So I like the Mag pick, and I really think Sawkasm is starting to get choked out in this matchup. He's going to have to find alternate ways to win. If he's against Magdoll on the other side, he is severely lacking win conditions all of a sudden. Heracross, a threat without a doubt. I don't think the Porygon 2 will get played, but if it does, Heracross is good against that, and it threatens Glalie, it threatens Starmie, to a lesser extent it threatens Medicham. None of this stuff really switches in or really wants to eat Mega Horns, let alone boosted Mega Horns. I like the Heracross pick in the matchup for sure, and my one criticism for Mewy has remained the same. As good as I think his team is, as aggressive as I think his team is, as cohesive as I think his team is, because he's doing a lot of things right, he still has not really brought in proper walls to a lot of things. I still think switching into some of the special stuff, especially the Zam, is going to be challenging. And Swampert is a physical wall, but it certainly doesn't check all physical threats. Heracross is on the list of one of the physical threats that it does not really deal with. And now, in addition to dealing with all these special threats, he's going to have to figure out a way to deal with Heracross as well. So, going into the fourth and final rounds, we swing it over one last time to Mewy. And these are the picks. Going to go with Houndoom, baby. Scooby-Doom, Who Let the Dog Out? And also Quagsire. Okay, so picking Houndoom into Alakazam, in and of itself, good enough, justified in my opinion, but I think Houndoom is actually pretty awesome in this matchup. It's going to cook Regice, it's going to be a threat to Venusaur, it doesn't come into Heracross, but it certainly can outspeed and threaten it if they start on equal footing. Even Zapdos doesn't really love coming in to stab Fire Blast or stab Crunch or what have you. The T-Tar can generally counter Houndoom, but even then you've got to worry about things like Toxic or Will-O-Wisp from the Doom. Overall, I think that is a fantastic pick for the matchup. Another one that I really like from Mewy. Very intrigued by that B matchup. Very back and forth. ThisGuyMuks for Quagsire, huh? I'm not clear what led him. I mean, I guess it's just the Aerodactyl. Like, I don't know what else led him to the I really need a crappy rock resist, but it's got to just be the Aerodactyl, I guess. But Quagsire is another one. I mean, it does have Water Absorb, but I don't actually think it beats Vaporeon. Vaporeon can sub up on you, and there's not really a lot you can do about it. It can throw Toxics at you. You don't really threaten the Vaporeon other than your own potential Toxic. I don't really think Quagsire is good against much of anything over here other than, I guess, the Aerodactyl. And if you want to Rock Resist, which, like, you should when you're against Aerodactyl, I feel like there were better options. I'm surprised that he didn't look at things like Flygon, Steelix, Donphan. I don't think Quagsire would have been my guy there, so I really liked the first five from Mux, but I'm not as into the Miltank or the Quagsire picks. Not really impressed by either. They both seem kind of bad in the matchup, so I kind of, if I'm Mux, would want to cut both of these and just whatever your last pick is, make that work. But I'm not too excited for him to bring Miltank or Quagsire, honestly. So here are the orange picks. They are going to go with the Champ. Really, really zoning in on that fighting weakness. They're also going to take Cloyster and Fori in one swoop, and all of a sudden the good spikers are off the table. Like I said, the Machamp threatens the Scarm, threatens the Bliss, threatens the Registeel, will almost certainly, if it gets played, carry Rock Slide, threaten the Moltres, not to mention it can come into Will-O-Wisp or Toxic from Moltres. It'll always have Guts, and it'll start hitting harder and harder in doing so. So I like the Machamp pick here. Awkwardly, as much as I was harping on him for not taking Vaporeon, the fact that Slowbro actually has the Psychic subtyping is better against Machamp specifically. But nevertheless, I think Machamp is quite a threat in the matchup. And as this draft has gone on, I've liked DJ Arctic Pirate's side of the matchup more and more. So Mongoose, two birds, one stone, adds his own spikes threat. Granted, his opponent does have a spinner, so probably not the end of the world, but as of a moment ago, this Starmie was not carrying rapid spin. Now it has to. And then he's going to also get a spinner. Not a good spinner, but a spinner is a spinner. And he's going to need that as well against an opponent who had Glalie not that long ago. So Cloyster seems fine. Just an obligatory spinner pick towards the end of the draft. Fori into Muck seems fine. There's only a handful of things here that can have fire attacks. Dragonite can obviously have it. And then Gengar can have Fire Punch. But all the rest of the stuff would have to go out of its way to run suboptimal things. HP Fire, Celebi, Fire Blast, Gyarados. Something to that effect. Fori is probably relatively safe in this matchup. And this is the exact kind of matchup where you want to take something like Fori. I think people taking it too early, it ends up you just load up against it. It's very easy to take a million things that viably run fire attacks, so on and so forth. But by waiting until later in the draft, in this case, much later, you can kind of cherry pick what matchup you pick it in and put it into a matchup where the opponent isn't all that likely to have a ton of fire attacks, and this is a prime example of that. Like I said, maybe HP Fire from Celebi doesn't even seem that good in the matchup as a whole. It's bad into all of Lax, Aerodactyl, Charizard, Hariyama, Vaporeon, so I would not be excited to carry HP Fire. And then Dragonite, like I said, can have Flamethrower or Fire Blast, and it probably will, but that's just one Mon. I think generally speaking, Fori is going to be good, and also his opponent doesn't have a Rapid Spinner. So this is yet another matchup where at first I thought it was close, I thought it was even, I was maybe even leaning in the direction of Mux, especially because I don't like the Lax into the B, but as we have played this out, I think the matchup has swung in the direction of Captain Awesomeness, and certainly the Fori is going to help with that opinion. So, the final double pick now from Sawkasm. He's got a couple of issues that he's going to need to address. This is how he's going to address them. Going to go with Gardevoir and also Dusclops to finish out his draft. Yeah, I mean, if he's staring down the double fighter and he feels that he really needs another Psychic Mon, then perhaps Gardevoir is one of the better options available. That's a third potential Wish user for him alongside the Bliss and the Jolteon, so certainly if he wants that move somewhere, he's got the option. And unlike some of the other fighters, the Gardevoir can actually potentially threaten things like the Claydol, like the Milotic, what have you, so maybe that's a reasonable pick. The Dusclops I think is good as well. That certainly indicates, and I don't know that I love this strategically, but it certainly indicates that he is intending on bringing the Skarmory, because why else would you take Dusclops if you don't want to just protect Spikes with it? So I think the game plan right now is to protect Spikes, but I don't know about bringing the Skarmory at all. I mean, this could be a fantastic elaborate bluff. I mean, imagine if he cuts the Skarmory and the Dusclops, and then DJ Arctic Pirate ends up loading Claydol Magneton into a non-Skarmory. That is interesting and is a way that Sawkasm could potentially win this game. But the Dusclops pick certainly should scream that he is intending on bringing the Skarm. So whether he should bring the Skarm or not, that's a fantastic question. But seems like that's where he is thinking this is going. So, swinging this back around, the final picks for the orange team. They've got Nidoking. All right. And then Tauros and Quillfish. Some interesting choices here. I've never liked Nidoking. Never have, probably never will. I like it in GSC, but that's not applicable here. If there's a matchup for Nidoking, perhaps this is it. It does actually threaten a lot of this stuff. It has a very diverse move pool. Mega Horn for Celebi, gets like Thunderbolt for Gyarados, Ice Beam for Dragonite. I could see it. Ultimately, I don't think that he's going to play it, but like, it's not one of those last Mons where you roll your eyes and you're like, there's basically zero chance that this gets played. The Nidoking might actually get played and could be decent in this matchup. I think his team is good enough without it, and I think he's got a solid 6 without it. but I don't hate the Nidoking here. Not a Mon that I've ever personally been a fan of, but it is a sensible pick in the situation. The Tauros pick is wonderful here as well. There is no normal resist in sight, so that is going to certainly prompt Mewy to... He's going to be forced to take a normal resist with his last pick, and he better think carefully about what it is, because he's probably obligated to bring it. Otherwise, switching into something as simple and basic as just a return from Tauros is going to be a nightmare. So that's a perfect pick for Mongoose. That's going to force a specific, not only a specific response, but a specific change in the builder. Mewy is going to have to bring whatever normal resist he takes. He has absolutely no choice. So that was a pretty big exploit there for Mongoose. He doesn't even have to bring the Tauros, but in and of itself, just taking it is going to force a normal resist to be both drafted and played. And that's making it so his 8th pick has to be played, and it's taking up a valuable spot that one of these other pokes would have taken. Porygon 2, I think, is going to get cut, but I like every single one of these other pokes in the matchup, and now you're going to have to be without one of them because you must respond to the Tauros or you're simply going to lose to it. So I think that was a huge pick for a large Mongoose here. Quillfish. I mean, yeah, taking a Spiker into an opponent who never did draft a spinner. Why not? We'll talk after. The final picks of this draft are Espeon and also normal resistive choice, Armaldo. Man, I wonder if he's seriously considering cutting the Starmie at this point. I mean, it might just be a coincidence that both Starmie and Armaldo are rapid spinners, but he had his pick of the litter there. There were quite a few other normal resists available, and the fact that he specifically chose that one, I mean, it could be because the rock typing threatens the Regice and because the bug typing threatens the Cheetar. It could just be that he views it as an actual threat in the matchup, but he knows with the normal resist that he's obligated to run, that he has to cut something, so I wonder if he's thinking about cutting the Starmie. Very, very interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. The Espeon pick. Yeah, you know, Psychic is actually reasonably threatening here. I don't think the Nidoking will be played, but it is weak to Psychic. And then obviously the Hariyama and the Weezing, which I do think will be played. Maybe the Yama is cuttable. Maybe. But I do think Espeon is good against those as well. I'm not excited about the Miltank or the Quagsire. I might very seriously consider actually running the Espeon. The team for me, if I'm Muks, might be these 5, the first 5, plus the Espeon, and just drop the Miltank and the Quagsire. But we'll see how he decides to build it. And that's our draft. So as always, we're going to start talking about some predictions. The teams in the A seats in basically every draft always seem to be pretty strong, and I think that is applicable here as well. I was teetering back and forth throughout the draft. I obviously didn't like the Snorlax into the Celebi, but it stinks because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like a lot of the time I say that I don't think Snorlax is that good, and I don't think it should be a round 1 pick, and it's so easy to counter. But then people don't take advantage of it, and I feel like that's what happened here as well. There's just so much more that he could have done. He didn't, I mean, he's got the Regirock, but like, that's only like okay. It doesn't necessarily beat the Lax. And he's got the Celebi, which he already had anyway. But I wonder why Mux at no point, why he didn't add Weezing, why he didn't add specific picks, why he didn't add more things that learn Focus Punch and whatnot. Why he didn't take a fighter into Lax, I think is a great question. So, like, I don't feel like he went as hard down the rabbit hole as he could have as far as actually countering it, but yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. I was back and forth on the matchup throughout, but I definitely think CptAwesomeness finished stronger. I'm not excited about the Miltank pick or the Quagsire pick. I think basically everything here, maybe a little bit less so on the Nidoking, but basically everything from Awesomeness is very viable and makes a lot of sense in the matchup and has a real chance of being played. I thought that Sawkasm, and I don't know if that was an individual decision or a team decision, but I thought that that Moltres pick was an egregious fuck up for him, and I thought not only would the Vaporeon really benefit his matchup, but as it turns out, the Vaporeon ended up in Awesomeness' team, which really benefits his matchup. So I think Sawkasm with that pick not only hurt himself, but also hurt his teammate. And I think that Vaporeon Wheezing double switch that I called out at the time really, really swung this matchup. And I don't know that Mux really fully recovered from it. I also think the Fori is a huge issue against a heavily grounded team. Against 6 out of 8 of these being, or sorry, 5 out of 8 of these, Levitate, being grounded, and him never really picking up a spinner. He very well might run all of the Gengar, the Gyarados, the Dragonite, as I think he should, and make the Fori a little bit worse, but still the spikes are not fantastic for you. I could see it going either way, but I am going to give the edge to Captain Awesomeness. Mux as a whole, even though coming into this tournament I thought he was a reasonable player, and he did have a pretty decent performance in CALLOUS Draft Duel, Mux, for whatever reason, has really been struggling in this tournament. I think he's entering this week with a 1-4 record, which happens to the best of us. I was 1-4 in SPL one year. Not a good record. Shit happens. But he's been having a tough tournament for whatever reason. And factoring that in, combined with the fact that I think this draft towards the end swung in the direction of Captain Awesomeness, I am going to predict a victory for the captain. So in the middle, my boy, a large mongoose. Like I said, don't even know this dude, but he is undefeated. And he did a lot of things that made a lot of sense. I thought the Venusaur pick was brilliant. I thought that the Tauros pick was brilliant. I thought the Zapdos coming back to him wasn't brilliant. I mean, kind of a pick that anybody could make, but was certainly very fortunate that that somehow made it back to him into an opponent who started their draft with Starmie and Swampert, so that was a good start, obviously. I think he did a lot of things right. I like Mewie's team as well. I think this is perhaps, for me, the most intriguing matchup. Two very strong teams here. I think both B players clearly had a pretty good draft. I don't know that Mewie fully addressed the special issues on the other side. Certainly the Houndoom, which he is absolutely obligated to bring, is going to help tremendously against the Alakazam. As far as switching into the Regis and the Zapdos, that's a little bit less clear right now. And then there's also the Tauros pick, which, like I said, I thought was brilliant and completely changed the matchup because it forced the normal resist pick, and he has to actually bring the normal resist. So the question is, what do you cut now? Certainly the Porygon 2, I think, gets the boot, but what else do you cut if you're Mewie? I'm actually going to throw out something weird, but I actually think I would really consider cutting the Glalie here. I think the squad that I might roll up with if I'm Mewie might be these first 4 plus the Doom plus the Armaldo. We'll see what he decides to do, but I think that is probably, at a glance, without sitting down and really thinking about it as deeply as you need to in this format, that's probably my inclination if I were in Mewie's seat. Mewie does have some threats that are going to be challenging for Mongoose. Certainly the Medicham, if he's got prediction skills, is a massive, massive threat. A set like Brick Break, Rock Slide, Shadow Ball, HP Flying, for example, is something where if he is correct with his predictions, then a large Mongoose has absolutely no answer to that. He could get wrecked by the Medicham, and perhaps that's one reason to just bring the Porygon 2 anyway, because I think one of the very best ways that Mewie potentially could win this is if he gives all of the Starmie, the Raikou, the Porygon 2, gives all 3 of them T-Wave, and just loads up the Medicham with Para support, and then just goes to town with the Medicham and makes predictions. I think it could absolutely wreck him. Like I said, Brick Break, Shadow Ball, Rock Slide, HP Flying is something that absolutely none of this can switch into if he's able to correctly make his predictions. That being said, I am still going to give the advantage to a large Mongoose here. I'm going to predict him to complete his undefeated season and end up 6-0. I think these are 2 of the strongest teams in this draft, and I think this is the matchup that interests me the most So I'm definitely looking forward to watching this one whenever it plays and to commentating on it. But gun to my head, prediction has to be made. I'm going to go ahead and give the nod to a large mongoose. And then finally, DJ Arctic Pirate against Sawkasm. This one, tragically, not a lot of suspense. I have felt throughout the vast majority of the draft that DJ Arctic Pirate has had the advantage, and nothing meaningful happened here to change my mind. I think Slowbro, necessary evil. I think Dusclops, interesting. Maybe changes the matchup if he can actually get a spike down, which is easier said than done. But I think that DJ has way too many threats, and I think he brought all the right tools. I think the mixed meta, the mixed men's, the double fighter, one of which in particular being Blaziken, I think those are all massive, massive threats that Sawkasm does not have good answers for. And I think the fact that it's Magdoll into Skarmory, into a passive team with Skarmory, into a team that really, really needs spikes to win, I think all of those factors combined, it is just too much, and I think that DJ Arctic Pirate will take this. But I will go back to and re-emphasize the one thing that I think could get funky and swing this the other way is if Sawkasm chooses to not bring the Skarmory. If he cuts the Skarm, cuts the Dusclops, and then maybe finds himself in a matchup where his opponent brings both Mag and Doll into not Skarmory, then it gets interesting, and then it's a little bit closer. I wonder if DJ Arctic Pirate ultimately only brings one of the Doll or the Magneton, but not both. That might be the happy medium. I'm not sure. But I think maybe, I mean, it opens things up. That's the thing. Like, if you're DJ Arctic Pirate and you only bring the Doll, but not the Mag, then can't you lose to Skarm and Dusclops on the other side? Can't you potentially not get rid of the spikes? And likewise, if you bring Magneton only, but not Claydol, isn't it possible that the Skarm gets a layer or maybe even 2 layers down, and then, yeah, you kill it, but you're stuck dealing with those 2 layers? So it's a really interesting dynamic here. I mean, ultimately, I think DJ will probably bring both Mag and Doll, which raises the interesting question of what do you cut? So, like, maybe he doesn't bring it because he doesn't have room for both. He could just not bring the Machamp and the Quillfish. I mean, we could just be overthinking it. His team could literally just be the first 6 here, just the Meta, Milo, Mence, Doll, Blaziken, Magneton. It could just be that, and honestly, if he just brings those 6, he'll probably just win. So maybe that is the simplest solution, but the pump fake, maybe I'll actually bring the Skarm, maybe I won't thing, I guess has potential to make Arctic Pirate make something weird and throw a little bit in the builder, but I think if he just keeps it simple and just realizes that he has threats that his opponent can't deal with, he should probably be able to get this done one way or the other. So I'm going to predict DJ Arctic Pirate, like I said, and with that, I actually have Orange sweeping the red team in this draft. I'm going to say it is a 3-0 victory for Team Orange, which is obviously not the outcome that Red wants or needs if they have any hopes of actually making playoffs, which, like I said, they would need a lopsided victory in order to do. But my predictions really don't mean anything. The only thing that matters is what happens in the game. So obviously when those happen, I'll bring them to you. In the meantime, let me ask you if you've somehow made it this far. I don't think most people necessarily watch at the end when I'm going on my little rambles, but if you're here, please consider hitting that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you've not already done so. And as always, open comment section. Let me know what you guys think about this draft and who you think has the edge. Thank you for watching. More CALLOUS Draft League, including playoffs next week, coming up.